Say the word hello. Simple, right? Your ancestors couldn't do it. Not because they didn't want to. Their bodies physically couldn't make that sound. For most of human history, the voice in your head speaking these words right now would have been biologically impossible. And figuring out what changed inside the human throat might be the strangest discovery in the history of evolution. Let's start with the machinery, because before there were words, there had to be a throat capable of making them. Every land mammal on Earth has a larynx, the voice box, positioned high in the neck. It sits close to the back of the mouth, connected almost directly to the nasal passage. This is why a dog can breathe and drink water at the exact same time without choking. Their airway and their throat are separate lanes. Humans are different. Somewhere in our evolutionary past, the larynx dropped. It sank lower in the throat, creating a long open chamber above it called the pharynx. This single anatomical shift is the reason you can produce vowel sounds no other primate can make, but it came with a cost. That same drop is why humans, uniquely among mammals, can choke to death on food. Every year, thousands of people die because a piece of food goes down the wrong pipe. Your ancestors traded a survival risk for the ability to speak. Evolution rarely gives you something for free. Anthropologist Philip Lieberman spent decades trying to reconstruct exactly when this happened. In the 1970s, he built physical models of ancient vocal tracts, casting the throat shapes of Neanderthals based on fossil skull structure. His conclusion was controversial. He argued that Neanderthals, our closest extinct relatives, had a higher larynx position than modern humans, not silent, not incapable of communication, but limited. Lieberman's models suggested Neanderthals could produce consonants just fine, but their vowel range was narrow, closer to a nasal, restricted set of sounds than the full range you use without thinking about it right now. Other researchers pushed back hard, and here's where it gets messy, because throats don't fossilize. Cartilage and soft tissue rot away within days of death. Every reconstruction of an ancient voice is built on second-hand evidence: skull shape, neck vertebrae, a single fragile bone called the hyoid. The hyoid is the only bone in your body that doesn't connect directly to any other bone. It floats in your neck, anchored by muscle, and it's essential for swallowing and for shaping speech. In 1989, researchers excavating a cave in Israel called Kebara found a Neanderthal hyoid bone, nearly identical in shape to a modern human's. For a moment, this seemed like proof. Proof that Neanderthals could speak exactly like we do, but a bone can only tell you what shape the machinery was. It can't tell you how the brain behind it used that machinery. It can't tell you whether the muscles and nerves controlling it worked the same way. A bone is a shape, not a sound, which brings us to the part that has nothing to do with anatomy at all. In 2001, a research team studying a British family known simply as the KE family discovered something remarkable. Roughly half the family members across 3 generations had severe difficulty with language, not because of hearing problems or low intelligence, but because they struggled to physically coordinate the muscles needed for speech. Geneticists traced the cause to a single mutated gene. They named it FOXB2. FOXB2 doesn't build a voice box. It doesn't build a mouth. What it does is help wire the neural circuits that control fine motor coordination, the split-second muscle sequencing required to shape air into words. Every mammal has a version of this gene. But the human version differs from a chimpanzee's by only 2 amino acids, 2 tiny changes, and an entire species gain the ability to speak in sentences. Researchers estimate this mutation became fixed in the human population somewhere between 200,000 and 2 million years ago, a window so wide that scientists still argue over which end of it is correct. Some believe Neanderthals carried a version of this same mutation, discovered through DNA extracted from fossilized bone in 2007. If true, it means our closest relatives may have shared at least part of the neurological hardware for speech, but hardware isn't the same as software. Having the right wiring doesn't guarantee the same signal ever ran through it. Here's a question almost nobody asks. If speech required this much specialized machinery, a dropped larynx, a rewired gene, a dedicated brain region, how did any of it get started in the first place? A handful of researchers think the answer is that speech wasn't actually first. Something else was: gesture. Primatologist Michael Corbellis has argued for decades that language began not in the mouth but in the hands. Watch a chimpanzee in the wild and you'll see something striking. Their vocal calls are almost entirely fixed and automatic, a scream of alarm, a hoot of excitement, sounds they can't control or combine into anything new. But their gestures are different. Chimps use hand movements flexibly, deliberately, adjusting them depending on who's watching. That flexibility, Corbelis argued, is the real seed of language, not sound, intention behind movement. If he's right, your ancestors may have been communicating in complex, structured ways with their hands long before their throats caught up. Sound would have come later, as a shortcut. A way to communicate in the dark, around a corner, with your hands full of firewood or a spear. Speech didn't replace gesture so much as it inherited the same underlying grammar, the same sequencing, just moved into a different channel. Some linguists believe this is why sign languages today are not primitive substitutes for speech at all. They're full languages, with grammar just as complex as anything spoken aloud, built on the same neural circuitry humans had ready long before the first sentence was ever spoken out loud. And here's what's stranger still. Even with a fully modern throat and a fully modern brain, language can vanish in an instant. In 1861, a French surgeon named Paul Broca examined a patient who had lost almost all ability to speak, despite understanding everything said to him perfectly. The man could only produce a single sound. After his death, Broca opened his brain and found damage isolated to one small region in the left frontal lobe. That region now carries his name, Broca's area. Damage it and a person can think in full sentences but never get them out. The words exist. The machine that turns thought into sound does not. This isn't just history. It happens today, constantly. Every year, thousands of stroke patients wake up with something doctors call Broca's aphasia. They understand every word spoken to them. Their intelligence is untouched, but their own sentences come out broken, halting, missing half their words, as if a lifetime of language got filed in a cabinet that suddenly won't open. Speech therapists have documented patients who can sing a song they knew from childhood perfectly, word for word, using a completely different neural pathway, but can't say the same words in normal conversation seconds later. The words aren't gone. The door to them is locked. This tells us something unsettling. Speech was never one invention. It was a stack of separate systems that all had to arrive together. A throat shaped to produce vowels, a gene wiring the muscles that control it, a brain region translating thought into motor sequence. Remove any single layer and the whole system fails, even if the other two are perfectly intact. So what did the very first sentence in human history actually sound like? Nobody will ever know for certain. No recording exists. No fossil captures a sound. Every reconstruction, every computer model, every actor hired to growl out a guess at an ancient vowel is an educated approximation built from bone shape and inherited genetics. The honest answer is that we are listening for an echo that stopped existing hundreds of thousands of years ago. But here's what we do know. Every time you speak right now, without thinking about it, without noticing the effort, you are running 4 ancient systems at once. A throat shaped by a trade that let you talk but also let you choke. A gene passed down through a lineage so old it predates our species. Hands that may have spoken in silence long before your voice ever did. And a small patch of brain tissue that, if damaged, would trap every thought you've ever had behind a door it can no longer open. You didn't build any of this. You inherited it, piece by piece, mutation by mutation, across a timeline longer than you can really picture. The next time you say something as simple as hello, you're not just making a sound. You're the end result of one of the strangest evolutionary chains ever assembled, one that took millions of years to build, and that your ancestors, for most of human history, could not use at all.